the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hey, my name is Scott Maderer, and thanks for tuning in to the Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. And that is the man himself. And our guest for today, Scott Maderer. And of course, my name is Joshua. I am your host. And every day, every week, every episode, we ask you a question. We start off the episode with a question. Today's question is, how do you assemble the puzzle pieces of your life to truly live your calling? Well, Scott is the perfect guest, the perfect guy to answer that question. In 2011, Scott and his wife Carrie took Inspired Stewardship as a business to serve Christian men and couples that are struggling to live out their calling. They work to help align the way you see your time, your talent, and your treasures so that you can identify it and live a fully authentic life that allows you to authentically live your calling, serve others, and provide for your family. In 2017, they took the business full-time, offering assistance through one-on-one coaching, speaking, and workshop. Scott's book, titled Inspired Living, Assemble the Puzzle of Your Calling by Mastering Your Time, Your Talent, and Your Treasures, was published by Morgan James, July 2nd, 2024. And today, Scott is going to be sharing his insight, his wisdom, and perspective to us with us today. Scott, I'm honored to have you on the show. Thank you for coming. How are you doing?
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Scott, it's of course I'm always really what really caught my attention is the word stewardship. One of the things that my friend always told me is like you should be a good steward of not only your time, but what she always would say was like a good steward of your money. And that to me struck a chord because no one's really said like the key word there is steward, right? What makes it different, what makes it separate. But before we get into that, Scott, I always like to start with the origin story. What was a young Scott Maderer like? Was a young Scott Maderer, did he always think he was going to get into one-on-one coaching or Christian helping Christian couples? What would the young Scott say to the Scott of today?
Well, actually, when I was growing up, when I was a kid, my idea was that I was going to actually become a doctor and do medical research.
Wow.
I actually went to college. I have a degree in biochemistry. I have a second degree in genetics. A couple of hard science degrees, was doing pre-med stuff and all of that. And I started doing research work in a lab, doing all of that work, and realized real quickly that actually a lot of medical research was really about chasing grant money, and not that much was about actually helping people, which at its core, what I always really wanted to do was help people. Growing up, I was always that kid that other kids came to for help. I was always the tutor. I always, through college, I tutored like half the football team, to get them through chemistry and that kind of thing. I always was that person that others looked to for help. That's always kind of stinks when you're dating because you're always in the friend zone, because it was always like I was the guy that the girls went to for advice, not to date, but that's okay. I'm married now and I love my wife. So everything worked out in the end. But, that was kind of my drive. And then when I realized, okay, medical research probably isn't the way I want to do this, I actually pivoted. I became a school teacher. I did that for 16 years. Loved teaching, loved working with kids, hated the politics, didn't like all the overhead, didn't like all the stuff. Talk to any teacher, they'll tell you there's a lot of stuff that comes along with teaching that isn't teaching. That's the not fun stuff. That's the part that we don't like to do. And so eventually I left teaching, and in the words of my students, I joined the dark side because I went from teaching, I went to work for a private company doing testing. So I actually started writing tests for a living. So it was kind of one of these things where the students were like, you went from teaching to testing. How is this? But again, the reason why I went into testing is because of the work that we were doing. It was still with a nonprofit company. It was still very focused on helping others. It was still very focused on using testing for good things, not just, test for test's sake. didn't always work out that way, but that was the intent behind the company. Did that for 11 years, worked myself up into an executive position, kind of a senior position, had a big team of people, flying all around the country, big budget, big paycheck, all of those nice things. But as I was doing it, I kept working on myself, working on my skills, learning more about what I love to do. And I realized that as a teacher, what I really loved about teaching was the coaching part, was the interacting with the kids, helping them grow, not even just the content, but it was the coaching. And now I'm in a leadership position, and, I loved coaching the leaders in the company and bringing them up. And that part of the job was what I really loved. And so as I began to identify that, my wife and I actually started the coaching business on the side. So I'm working my executive job, working 60 hours a week, coming home and working on my coaching business, 2 or 3 hours in the evening. Yeah, as I told my wife, you're not going to see me for a while, you know. But we started doing that in 2011, and eventually it kind of grew to the point where I reversed my climb up the corporate ladder. I literally told the company, look, I'm giving you a year's notice. I know I'm in a senior position. We need to replace me. Identify a replacement, I'll train them, then I'll help them, and then I'll go down to part-time, and then I'll leave, and I literally did that. I kind of reversed my climb up the corporate ladder, left the company, and then I've been doing the coaching full-time ever since.
Wow, I love that because you just pretty much told that. Of course, you gave us an overview of the journey of your life so far, and the career trajectory of where you are now coaching full time, 1-on-1. But you are talking about, or for our audience and listeners out there, the website is just inspiredstewardship.com, and that is the coaching that you are currently doing. Scott, talk to us about that. Talk to us the inspiration. What was the pivotal moment? Why inspired stewardship? What was the inspiration behind that? Was there a particular pivotal moment in your life where you said, okay, this is the path I'm going to be taking, and this is what I'm going to be coaching people about?
So it grew over time. The idea of the coaching business came first, and we knew we wanted to coach people. And my wife and I had gone through our own financial struggles, our own difficulties around money. And as you were, talking about stewardship, a lot of times comes up around money, but it means more than just money. And so we started in that area, and I actually was suicidal because of finances. My wife and I almost got a divorce because of finances. Testify if this sounds familiar. You hear this story. That was really our trajectory. We had a lot of debt. We didn't, we were struggling. This was during a period where I actually was between teaching and before I got the executive job, and that we were in all of those struggles. And we finally kind of came together and realized that, hey, we need to do something about this. We need to change this trajectory. We need to either get divorced and go our separate ways, or we need to decide we're going to change what we're doing. We're going to work together, and we're going to get out of this mess. And so we turned around and got out of the mess, making across 2 years, 11 months. I'm not allowed to round that up to 3 years. My wife will kill me. It's 2 years, 11 months. He paid off about $78,846.32.
Wow.
Not that I know it to the penny, but I know it to the penny.
Oh,
And we
wow.
did that while making $55,000 a year. You can kind of do the math and figure out we lived on nothing. We basically cut everything out. That was how we chose to do it. That's not how I would say everyone needs to do it. But in our case, that's the route we took. And people started to notice because we were weird. I mean, we were making weird decisions and doing weird things. And people were like, what are y'all doing? And, it's working for you. Can you help us? And so naturally, we kind of began coaching people. And we did that for a little while as just kind of a ministry and an outreach. And then we realized, wait a minute, maybe we can turn this into a business. And so it originally started as focused intensity coaching. And then as I began to work with people more and more, I've always been the coach. My wife does a lot of the behind the scenes and a lot of the logistics work, kind of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, as I'm doing the coach part, I started realizing, well, wait a minute, now people are asking me for help with their productivity and their time management and this sort of stuff. And it turns out that a lot of the same frameworks and philosophies that work around money work around time. And then people started, we need to work on communication, and we needed to work on leadership, and we need to work. So I kept kind of adding more layers to the coaching as I discovered more. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm helping people with their time. I'm helping people with their talent. I'm helping people with their, well, that's what we call stewardship. So I started running things through that lens of stewardship. because at its core, what the word stewardship means is just managing the resources that you're blessed with well. And so that became the lens. And then, at that point, we changed to inspired stewardship, and it's been that ever since.
I love that. I love it. Managing your resources well. Of course, that feels like the exact definition of being a steward, right? We're talking about stewardship of money, which is the most common, being careful, being guarding it properly. I love that. I love, of course, you show the example of paying off your debts. It's unbelievable how you did it and the circumstances that you have. But going back to stewardship now and talking about inspired stewardship, you not only talk about money, you talk about time, talent, and really all your treasures will
Everything.
consider
Yeah.
everything, pretty much your time, talent, money, everything else. How does stewardship now fall into these other parts of your life? Because in my mind, I'm thinking stewardship, again, you're guarding your money properly, you're managing it properly, whatever these resources are. But I feel like there's a deeper aspect to this. How can we be good stewards of our time, talent, and our treasures? And how can we align that to live a fulfilling life, which is exactly what you are teaching, Scott?
So a lot of that, let me back up a step and I'll
Please,
define the stewardship a little bit more
please,
just to kind
please.
of unpack that. So where the word comes from, and if you're a Christian, you've heard this word used in Christian circles. And my joke is usually when someone starts talking about stewardship in church, it means, hey, we're starting a building campaign and we need you to donate. That kind of unfortunately is what the word has started to mean, but that's not really what it means.
Mhm.
So what is a steward? A steward back in medieval times, we got lords and castles and all of that stuff going on. The steward was the person that they worked for the lord, they worked for the person that owned the property,
Yes.
but they didn't own the property. Their job was to manage the property so that the lord's resources were taken care of. Okay, so that's why it became kind of a Christian word. So now if we take lord from from an earthly person to godly, that's kind
Yes.
of that lens, but it's the same concept. So, and again, if you're not a Christian, if you're not a believer, doesn't matter. The concept is still the same in terms of it's about looking for those higher things, those things that are bigger than you, the things that are more important than just whether or not, you watch Netflix tonight, or whether or not you grab a burger on the way home, or whether or not you whatever, and looking at it kind of bigger than that, and stepping back and being intentional and kind of asking that question: what do I want to be when I grow up? What do I want my life to look like? What do I want the financial area of my life to look like? What do I want my relationships to look like? What do I want my career to look like? What do I want my, all of these different components of my life to look like? Where are they today? What do I want them to look like in the future? And then begin to make intentional application of changing habits, changing mindsets, changing beliefs, all of those things, so that you can begin to move in the direction that you want to go. And again, where does that apply? Literally anywhere, because it's really not about a specific thing like time or money. It's more of the framework or the philosophy or the mindset of, wait a minute, is what I'm doing today getting me where I want to go? If not, what do I need to do different? Now, there's a million tools in the toolbox that we may apply, because there's a million different things that can hold you back from moving in that direction. It's not, one size fits all, but the
Yes.
framework is really one size fits all, because it's that idea of identifying where you're at, figuring out where you want to go, and then beginning to plot the route from A to B.
I love that. And of course, once you plotted all those things out, then you could start thinking about, okay, where does my time go? Where am I using my talents? And you can start aligning those things. And really, it starts from there. What do you want? And I think a
Mhm.
lot of people don't know what they want, and
Absolutely.
that's very difficult. And that alone, I feel like, is stewardship, right? Because
Mhm.
what do you want? And like, how do you guard your future, so to speak? How do you guard your own values? I feel like it really starts there. And then I feel like that's why it's, how do you call this, a deeper aspects to stewardship, so to speak. Scott,
It's
this is
really
something
about
that,
intentionality at
yes,
the
please,
core. It's
please.
about being intentional. That's the best word that I've ever been able to use to describe it.
I love that intentionality. We put a word to it. being intentional, and a lot of people are, right? Like we just kind of go to the flow, victim mentality, like
Yeah, by the
everything
way, me
affects us.
too. We
To be
all at
fair,
various
we
points in our
all
life
are.
and
That
or
is
in
true.
various parts of our life
That is true. Some
have
areas
points
of our
where
life.
we're not examining it, we're not paying attention to it, we're just kind of drifting. It might be our health for a while, it might be our money, it might be something else. And by the way, that's another thing. A lot of times, unfortunately, what wakes us up to it a lot of times is something going wrong. It's
Yes,
a crisis.
unfortunately, a crisis all the time.
Unfortunately, and so what
Unfortunately,
I'm trying to get people to do is before you have the heart attack, before you go bankrupt, before you have the crisis, well, let's start being intentional before we get to that point and maybe not have
precisely.
to go there, because
I
the
love
stove
that.
burns, it hurts.
It hurts.
Don't
No
do
one
that.
wants that. Like you want like you get yourself burned before you get away from the fire. It shouldn't. It's not a way to live. But sometimes sometimes it's
Unfortunately, that's
necessary.
how a lot of us learn the lesson.
Exactly. Sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes it's the only way we learn lessons. But like you say, there's another path that is possible, and that's what you're helping people do. Scott, I love that because it's interesting to our next question, which is like if you're living your calling, which is what you teach people, you coach people, living your calling by aligning your values, your time, being a steward of all of that. If living your calling was like building a house, you talked about like setting the foundations first before we get burnt, right?
Mhm.
Before we even get that crisis, at least we have this set. So if living your calling, what you're teaching and you're, being a steward was like building a house, what would be the foundation? And how do you ensure that structure remains strong? Because now you're teaching people to be a steward, but how do we, like you said, we need crisis first. But when that crisis comes, what is the foundation that we need, and how do we make sure that it's strong so that when the crisis comes, we're not, we don't fall apart all the time.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, because even if you're doing these things right, when and if a crisis does come, and most of us have something that comes during our life, part of what we do is how we respond to it. And so if you think of it as a house, what I've always considered the foundation is a combination of two things. One is our belief system, and the second is our habit system. So what I mean by that is our belief system is in our core of core, what do we truly believe about ourselves and about others?
Right.
Do we think, we're a good person? Do we think we're a worthy person? Do we think we're a capable person? Or do we think, I'm not really that capable. I've been lucky, the imposter syndrome. Oh, they're going to figure out that I really don't know what I'm talking about, and then it's all going to fall apart. Those are limiting beliefs as opposed to enabling beliefs, right?
Right.
Where
Okay. Okay.
where growth mindset is enabling, a limiting mindset is not enabling. The growth mindset is, wait a minute, other people can get good stuff, and I can get good stuff too. We can all win. Where the restrictive mindset is more, I've got to take it because otherwise they're going to take it from me. It's this kind
Oh,
of
yes.
fighty, kind of combative thing. I work with literally hundreds and hundreds of coaches all the time, and I'm part of a group where we have a growth mindset. And so literally I have coaches that will call me up and say, hey, I need help with this. Or I'll call up a coach, hey, I need help with this. We're technically in the exact same business, going after the exact same kind of clients, but we help each other anyway, because it's not about, I can win and that means you have to lose. It's more about how can we help each other so we all win? And so that's that growth mindset. So that's kind of the belief systems. The habit systems is the, what are your rituals? What are your routines? What are the
Mhm.
things you do, the no matter what's, the things that you do because that's just what you do.
Ah,
It's a habit. It's something that's a routine. It's something that's got structure to it. It always happens. Because here's the truth. All of us have habits.
oh,
Not all of us have the habits that we want,
interesting.
So it's about examining those habits and looking at what you're doing and looking at those patterns, and then identifying the ones that you don't want in your life and working to get rid of them, identifying the ones that you do want in your life and working to strengthen them, and identifying what ones aren't in your life that you need to inject in your life. So, example, I've done a gratitude journal every single day for probably a decade now. I'd have to look in the calendar and see, but it's at least 10 years. And why? Well, because I'm trying to program the habit of being grateful And also, by the way, notice how that also feeds back into my belief system of gratitude. It helps me look at the world and go, I don't care how bad today was, I'm going to find something to say thank you for.
Yes, of course.
And worst day on the planet, there's still some, if nothing else, I woke up this morning.
Of course.
I can find something to be grateful for. And so I kind of program myself to look at that. This is important for me because guess what? I have clinical depression. I honestly am one of those people that can fall into those deep, dark spirals. And so I've had to work really hard to establish a pattern, a routine, and a habit to help program my beliefs to help me fight that natural tendency that I have to go the other direction, if that makes sense.
I love that. I love that. Foundation, habits. It makes so much sense because you always have something to, like you said, these are things that you always fall back to. If everything feels lost, you don't know where to go, you don't know where the next direction, you just fall back into those habits, and then you start finding your way again. The
Mhm.
problem is we don't have habits rather. We 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 don't have habits that build us to the point where that's good habits rather that support our lives. I mean, habits are easy. Habits are
Well, yeah,
easy
we
in the
all have
sense.
habits.
Exactly, we
Yeah,
all have
you
habits.
can't escape that. You're going to have habits.
But it's a matter of taking what good habits actually build us. Like
Mhm.
habits, what scrolling, doom scrolling, easy. We all have that habit, right? Maybe getting distracted is a habit. I don't know. Like, but those things, we need to find those things that actually keep us strong, that keep us on that direction that we want, that aligns with our values. And we need to have those habits aligned with our values. I love that. And I think that is a really great takeaway from here today. But it all comes down to understanding yourself, right?
Mhm.
And it contributing to mastering, that I think that directly contributes to mastering your time, your talent. Scott, and this is very important because in order for you to build, I feel like the habits to build that foundation of have that strong foundation of building habits, you have to know who you are, like intentional, right? Understanding yourself. You've taught us that this is the great foundation to have as habits, but in order to build this, I think you truly need to know who you are, how to be intentional. Scott, how do you approach this when you talk to your clients, to couples? How do you teach them to be more intentional, so to speak? And for our audience of listeners out there who are interested as well, what can I do every day to be intentional, making sure that what I do is, right there, like this, my full attention, my full intent is being done there because it's one thing to make your coffee, try to think about things, but if you're intentional about it, I think it's deeper, it's different. But how can I be intentional about something as small as making my coffee?
So a lot of that, it comes back to that idea of, which is real popular right now. They call it mindfulness, right? Being
Yes.
mindful or attentive to what's going on in the moment. So here's the truth. Okay. Your brain is processing 200,000 to 300,000 inputs in a given, minute. Okay. Or less. That's probably, please don't quote me on the science of that, but that's the idea is sound. It may be a bit different number, but what it amounts to is there's hundreds of thousands of things coming into your brain. And the real truth is you've already trained your brain to pay attention to some things and ignore other things.
Yes.
We all do. Okay. It's just because trust me, if you tried to pay attention to everything that you're actually seeing and hearing right now, you can't do it. So here's a trick. Everybody that's listening right now, everybody that's watching right now, if you're doing this, stop for a second. And I'm going to stop for a second and stop talking and stop for a second and just close your eyes and just listen to what's around you. Are you suddenly hearing a noise that you weren't hearing a few seconds ago?
Absolutely. I'm hearing a little
And most of us
buzz.
are,
Most of us do.
95% of the people went, I suddenly noticed the air
Oh,
conditioner or the buzz,
exactly.
the buzzing of the insect or
Yes.
the clicking of the clock or something. There's something,
Mhm.
but you literally were not attuned to it, not paying attention to it just 2 seconds before until I called it out. And then all of a sudden your brain goes, sounds. Yes, I'm paying attention to sounds. Let me listen for sounds. By the way, I also did the trick of closing your eyes. So I cut out your visual so that you can
Yes.
hopefully pay even more attention to it. Okay, so all of that to be said, so what mindfulness is being intentional about where are you focusing your attention? Kind of sounds simplistic.
Mhm.
So how do you develop that? Well, again, it's a journey. It's not a destination. You develop it over time. So I'm a big believer in meditation. I'm a big believer in taking quiet time. I'm a big believer in having white space, which white space is time in your day where you're not doing anything. You're not looking at the phone. You're not typing on the computer. You're
Love
not
that.
talking to your friend. You're just quiet for a few minutes and paying attention to things like what's going on in my brain, what's going on in my body, how am I feeling, getting in tune with those things. And doing that as a habit then leads to, okay, now when I'm sitting down and making my coffee, I can actually tell myself, I can do it by kind of rote habit, just, I'm making coffee because I do that
Yes.
every morning and I know how to make coffee. Or I can literally stop and think, okay, wait, let's be careful and intentional about how exactly am I adding the sugar to the cup, and I'm putting the coffee grounds, and I pay attention to every step. That really is mindfulness. And again, you use the coffee example, so I'm using that one, but you can do that with anything. You can do that with a conversation. And what happens to a lot of us instead is the moment. So as an example, so I work with a lot of business owners. We're talking about business story of the week, people listening, business owners, right? A lot of us, it's like when we're working on business, we're thinking about, oh, I wish I could be spending time with my family. And then when we're with our family, we're thinking, oh, I need to answer that email for work. It's like you're not being present at work and you're not being present at home because you're constantly thinking about the other place.
Exactly.
Okay. That's an example of not being mindful and not programming your brain and not talking to, learning that, no, when I am home with my family, I'm with my family. The phone's not on. I'm not checking the emails. I'm not doing those things. Instead, I'm focused on spending time with my wife, spending time doing those things. So it's whether it's a small example like making a coffee or whether it's a big example, it's literally about setting aside those barriers and training your mind over time to filter out what you don't want to pay attention to and pay attention to what you do want to pay attention to.
I love that. And it's so simple, so difficult. This is not,
It's
especially
easy to
today.
explain. It's hard to do,
So difficult.
you
I
know.
mean, especially today. Like, there's so many distractions. And again, doom scrolling is so normal. It's such a habit for all of us, and you just feel like
Well, they design it to be addictive. They design
that's
it to
true,
encourage that behavior.
right there.
Okay,
Absolutely,
your brain runs off of chemicals, and your brain is happy chemicals are triggered in your brain, like dopamine, when you get little rewards, right?
of
So
course.
every time that little phone dings or the little red label on Facebook comes up, your brain's going, ooh, something. Let me pay attention, and then it gives you that little dopamine. So, like for instance, my phone screen, the screen that I look at if I unlock my phone, Facebook and all of those things, there's no way to tell how many notifications I have.
Yes,
Those,
yes.
those are all blocked. They come through in batches. So 3 times a day, I find out. Now, there are 5 people in this world that can come through at any time. I've got my phone
Okay.
set up there are 5 people, my mother, my wife, my son, there's a handful of people they can get through at any time. Everybody else, I'll answer you and I'll answer you in a relatively timely manner, but I'm going to
Mhm.
do it on my time, not on
Yes,
your time, because I don't want those interruptions and those notifications to pull me off from being mindful and in the moment.
I love that. And also, again, it's being a good steward of your time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You choose when to reply. We choose when to do these things intentionally, mindfully. Like when to answer these things, whether they're just a chat from a family or a business or an email. You choose your time of when to answering them. And I love how you pointed out white space. I don't think we ever hear that concept commonly, like white space. What in the world? I know white noise, but white space, like
Mm-hmm.
sitting there being bored, that's torture for some people. But
Well, yeah, and that's the point. Is that you're not
that's the
actually
point.
bored if you learn
Exactly.
to do it.
And it's not about being bored. It's really about programming yourself. And again, I love this because it's not only being a good steward of your time, it's also being a good steward of your And again, it aligns to everything. I love it, Scott. We've I feel like we've slowly aligned everything and everything that you've been teaching so far. Of course, with Inspired Stewardship, for our audience and listeners out there, you can check out inspiredstewardship.com to learn more. Scott, you talked to us about habits is a strong foundation, being intentional so we can build that foundation, being a good steward of your, not just your money, but your time and your talents as well. Scott, as we begin wrapping this up, is there anything that we miss about stewardship that you would love to leave behind our audience and listeners today?
I'll add one thing, and then I've got a gift that anyone could check out that might help
Please.
them some with some of this. But in one of the things that I would say, especially if you're in a relationship, if you're a couple, if you're, in a partnership of some sort, whether it's in business or whether it's in your personal life, the thing I would encourage is any of this work that you're doing that's on self work, involve that other person. Because one of the worst things that can happen sometimes is we begin to work on ourselves and we begin to develop ourselves and we end up growing away from or developing our own dream and pushing away the people that should be the biggest cheerleaders, should be walking alongside us. And so I encourage you, if you're in a partnership, if you're in a relationship of some sort, to work with that other person, involve them in the conversation, involve them in the work. So it's not just it's, I'm from Texas, so it's y'all on y'all.
Yeah.
That's the Texas way of saying it, right? And then, I put together a page for everybody. So if you actually go to inspiredstewardship.com/business story,
All
I've
right.
got some free resources there. So any of these, I've got some activities that you can do that will kind of help you dial in on your time or your talent or your treasures. If you want those, they can check out my book that you mentioned is on there. I have a podcast as well that's on there. So all of that information, as well as just if somebody hears this and they're like, hey, I'd love to learn more about this. Maybe this is something I need to work on. There's a way that you can jump on a call and just have a conversation with me. That's not so I can sell you anything. That's really just I'm always interested in helping people out if they're on this journey.
Wow, of course. And you are anything, you are a steward to other stewards, helping them in their own stewardship. I mean, once again, ladies and gentlemen, the website is inspiredstewardship.com/business story, and you guys will receive that gift from Scott himself. Scott, thank you so much once again. Thank you so much for your presence, for your insight. I absolutely enjoyed this one. I feel like we hit a lot of points in what you teach. And of course, I hope our audience and listeners
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I'm honored to be here, and I hope folks get some value from it.
absolutely. I certainly take a lot of it from here today. To all our audience and listeners out there, make sure to check out the website, inspiredstewardship.com/business story. Go grab that gift from Scott. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.